Sounds just about right for April, doesn't it? Well, let's start first with my guilty confession. When I realized today was April 25th, guess what I thought of? 8 months till Christmas. Oh, no. But the last thing I want to do is wish away those bird sounds or wish away spring. I want to savor it. Today, I'm asking for your help doing so. What signs of spring have you been seeing? Call us now, 204-780-0893. 780-0893. This will be a fun conversation and a busy one, I suspect. Waiting to respond to your calls today is Doug Collicutt. Doug is a retired biologist and our go-to guy at this time of year and pretty much every time of year. Doug, thanks for being here.
Oh, nice to be here, Janet.
And I've also asked CBC's Bryce Hoye to join us because I like Bryce a lot. He has a background in wildlife biology, a fantastic voice for radio, much like Doug. And I just thought it'd be fun for you to join the conversation. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. I am the resident birder here. So
a resident birder, it's true. We ask him all our questions. What was that? So if you've got questions, call us, 204-780-0893. We want to know what signs of spring you've been seeing. 780-0893. If you need a toll-free line, it's 1-800-268-5483. Let's start with the big picture, Doug. From a biological standpoint, how big a deal is spring?
Oh, it's the big deal for an awful lot of species. Birds coming back, reptiles coming up out of the ground, bugs coming out of their cracks in the trees and stuff.
Everything coming back to life,
yeah.
It seems.
It's all the critters that get to go away and miss our winters are coming back to life.
Bryce, do you look forward to spring?
Oh, yeah, big time. Just an anecdote here. I was at Fort White about a month ago. We were participating in Earth Day activities, which just happened a few days ago. But we were there a month ago. We were shooting some videos, and there was some activity going on. Some birds, a few geese. Back there this past weekend, it has come to life. I counted 24 bird species just from the CBC information table, just standing there for an hour. Snakes are there. Saw a woodchuck. The ground is just alive with small mammals. The trees are buzzing with butterflies and birds. Just a lovely time.
Just a lovely time. It is amazing how things are starting to change this spring. Are you hearing of a lot of activity, Doug?
Oh, yeah, there's lots of things happening, and I've seen a lot. I've been in touch with people about the Narcisse Snake Dens, which are apparently up and running a little early this year. So if people want to get up there, I suspect you probably shouldn't wait for the Mother's Day long or the Mother's Day weekend, which is traditionally the peak emergence time.
You shouldn't wait?
Yeah, I would get up there sooner rather than later. I think by the middle of May, things will be really winding down. It started so early. We had that wonderful warm El Nino winter, which didn't send a lot of cold down into the ground, so the ground warmed up earlier, snakes are up earlier. They don't go by the calendar, they go by the temperature.
Now, Bryce, I've never been to the Narcisse Snake Dens, and that's one of the reasons I asked him in too, because can you just describe to anyone who's never been there, like me, what it's like?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Born and raised in Winnipeg, I've been there a number of times over the last 35 plus years. I remember being there as a kid and being struck by these mats of snakes, which sounds spooky, but
gross.
It's really not gross. It's fascinating when you get up there, especially as a kid. You haven't really learned to fear certain things yet, right? But garter snakes are harmless. They are very friendly. In the presence of an interpreter up there, you are allowed to interact a little bit. This space is great because of the access. You can actually see this globally significant phenomenon unfolding there. There are these balls of snakes, which I might let Doug explain what's going on there because I'm not the expert. But it is a significant site. And in the last few years, less activity. I usually get up there once or twice a year. And, I talked to the interpreter there last year, did a story that Doug was actually in last year, kind of about just this anecdotal sense, anyways, that fewer snakes in the area. But it sounds like they are coming up in the last few weeks, according to what you're hearing. Hey, Doug?
Yeah, I've had some reports from people that say that one of the dens in particular, which is typically the larger den, is quite active. Some people even calling it a frenzy of snakes at this point. But it's, hit and miss as to when you get there. And don't forget, if people are going there, you got to go on a nice sunny, warm day. Don't go when it's raining and cold or snowing like some people have in the past.
Because snakes aren't going to move as much, right? Is that correct? Or does it
They'll
just make it more
if
pleasant?
it's inclement weather, they'll just go back down into the dens for a while.
Right. So they want to be warm.
But I mean, the balls of snakes that Bryce was talking about, of course, is what happens is you get all these male snakes that come out and mill around on the bottom of the dens, these sinkholes in the limestone, and waiting for big female to come out. And of course, the female wants to get the heck out of there, but she ends up dragging dozens of males up with her. She will eventually mate with one of them up out of the den site, and then off and feed for the summer. And then the boys go back waiting for the next female to come out. So it's,
Let's not think about that too much. It's a little bit terrible,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
Shane has joined us now. Shane, thanks so much for calling Radio Noon. How are you?
My pleasure. Well, first of all, I have to tell you that they're so right. The Narcisse Snake Dens they're free, first of all, and kids need to see this because they're so excited and it's so wonderful. But I was wanting to say I go to the dog park every day and watching the formerly hard as a rock buds on all the different, trees and bushes start to swell and start to break out and the leaves start out. I mean, you can start to believe that summer will come.
What does that do to your spirit,
Oh,
Shane?
well, blue sky helps a lot. And we've had a lot of great blue skies in the last week. And the temperature is gorgeous. And, it sounds silly, but watching the buds just burst out, like they're so excited about the change in temperature. It's amazing.
It's amazing. And is it the temperature that tells a tree it's time to send those leaves out?
You'll have to ask it. You'll have to ask a tree. But I'll tell you, the squirrels are chasing each other for, I presume, procreative objectives. But they're very active too, and the dogs, of course, enjoy watching that.
Oh, it just sounds like a wonderful day at the dog park, Shane. Thanks so much for calling in. So,
yeah, I mean, that's something. I mean, the plants don't go on by calendar, or any of these things go by calendar. They go by temperature. As the temperature warms up, one of my always harbingers of springs is pussy willows. When you see them finally starting to pop out, you know that spring is probably here, and the wood frogs will be calling in the ponds. And
wood frogs will be calling in the ponds. I love that. I love the sound. Are we hearing those now?
Well,
Frogs?
the wood frogs in the city are probably just about done. I was at Assiniboine Park yesterday, and one of the ponds I know that is a regular wood frog breeding pond was full of eggs. No more calling frogs, so they're probably done. They get going pretty early in the year. They're the first amphibian to get going in the spring.
I know that there was concern about the health of frogs as well at some point. Like they're kind of are they sort of almost like the canary in the coal mine? They tell us what's going on?
Well, there is a notion in biology and ecology called an indicator species, and these are species that can be more sensitive to change. And you're right, frogs in different parts of the world have responded, maybe earlier than other, critters and creatures in habitats when there has been some exposure to some sort of change, usually brought on by us humans. And to Doug's point, I've heard a lot of frogs calling lately at Fort White. I think there's 2 species there. I think I heard the wood frog. What does the wood frog sound like? There's some analogy.
Well, the wood frog makes the kind of quark, quark, quark sound.
What's the one that sounds like when you run your finger across a comb?
That's the boreal chorus frog.
Okay, so I think both of those at Fort White.
Yeah, well, the sequence is wood frogs are first, boreal chorus frogs right after them, and then the leopard frogs will start around the same time too.
Right, and I've heard that there's some ponds kind of in the Charleswood area that are, really alive with that croaking right now. So yeah, lots going on right now.
We've got Shane who's watching on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page. Shane just called in. Jake is watching. Hi, Jake. Nice to see you. I can't see you. I really can't. But nice that you're seeing us. And sending in a comment, too. Please remember that you can do that. And if you're listening right now, join in the conversation. 780-0893, toll-free 1-800 268-5483. Jake on YouTube says he's seeing lots of robins and blue jays, and he seems to think that's early. Is it early for robins and blue jays?
Robins, maybe not, no. And they tend to flock up when they migrate, so you get bigger numbers of them in the spring than you tend to see in the summer. They kind of disperse, and sure, you'll find a few together here and there. Blue jays too, maybe you might see more of them together at different times of year. I will say, like Doug's saying, that he's seeing and hearing that there's more activity earlier in the year with frogs and snakes. The same's true with some of the birds. There was a great horned owl that was nesting in northeastern Winnipeg that a bunch of the birders found out about. There's this app you can use called eBird where you post the location and date and the species that you see. And you can log different details. But I am a wildlife photographer as well, so I saw people posting about this in February. And owls tend to mate and breed earlier, like in the winter, than a lot of other birds, and many of them stick around in the winter. And I went down there and I got to visit these two lovebirds and see their two babies grow over the course of a couple months. But it seemed early to me as well, that they had fledged and they were gone a few weeks back. So I'm curious to know if anyone else is seeing any birds that they kind of get that feeling, this feels a little bit earlier than usual.
Is that, how important, first of all, these observations? I mean, we've got climate change that we're talking about. Are we seeing things happening earlier? What are we seeing in terms of effects?
There's a lot of anecdotal information about this, but very little sort of hard data collecting. I just mentioned now there's a really good website and app, the iNaturalist.ca, that lets people post reports of things. And this is kind of citizen science project that can really amount to significant data over time. But that kind of sort of natural history data is not something that's a focus of either government biology agencies or museums or universities and such. This long-term collection of natural history data has never been the focus, unfortunately.
I'm just going to ask our director, Wendy, if Phil is still on the line. There he is. Phil, all right. Phil, thank you so much for calling Radio Noon.
Yeah, my line dropped, so I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back.
Yeah.
What did you want to tell us about?
Well, mainly there been some pretty slow birds I haven't seen or heard this year, and I was wondering how come they're pretty slow. I've been a bird watcher for a long time. So.
And where do you live, Phil?
In Kenton.
Okay.
And I used to go bird watching with David Hatch. He used to be an ornithologist. He was from Oak Lake area.
Doug, any thoughts on birds being slow?
What sort of things aren't you seeing?
Well, I haven't even heard of killdeer yet.
Oh, okay. I've heard killdeers in town.
Yeah. You and I went out into the Interlake one spring to look at the geese, I believe. It's Phil Graham here.
Well, it's great to hear from you. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, name rings a bell, Phil, but a long time ago.
Yeah, and I got interested in birding, and I used to do birding around the Oak Lake region with David Hatch. You probably knew David Hatch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But as it's a little slow. The swallows should be coming back this week. I haven't heard them yet either, so.
Yeah. Well, that's what people have to remember, too, is that every individual species has its own timeline of what it does and the habitat it's looking for and how various weather factors and other things will affect it. So it's you can't paint the broad stroke of, it's an early spring, everything's going to be early. Some of them may have stopped off on the way up and found a great resource for feeding for a week or two and decide to stay there. And weather conditions can, push birds, especially back and forth in some cases.
We were talking a moment ago about the importance of citizen scientists, and this is really what we're doing here. We're all out there. It's got to be incredibly valuable if we can keep good notes. And what is it you would, like ideally, Bryce, you go to eBird. That's one of your apps that you love. Doug, you mentioned iNaturalist.ca.
Yeah.
Do you keep notes yourself when you go out, or are there other advice you might have for folks who are listening?
Well, I'll start. eBird, it's this app by Cornell, which is kind of like this renowned ornithological research hub in the US. They also have an app called the Merlin app. That app, you can actually record birdsong and will help you identify the species. So people that are curious about this stuff but don't know where to start, iNaturalist, Merlin, eBird, these are all great things that will help you kind of like as a bridge to getting into these things. They assist you and help you navigate some of this stuff and learn. iNaturalist, I'll let Doug take that, but just for people who don't know, Doug is big on citizen science. He launched the Manitoba Herps Atlas, which was in some ways analogous to some of these things, which basically encouraged Manitobans for years to log their sightings of frogs and snakes, other amphibians and reptiles in the province, and that data can actually help inform research priorities. So maybe Doug wants to talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, with that project, that was 2011 that started. I shut it down in 2021, partly because these other opportunities were developing and I was getting bored with it. That's what happens sometimes. And the iNaturalist system is a really great one for entering records of anything that you find, insects, plants, birds, fish, whatever. And it's developing an enormous database. And Manitoba government did put together their sort of Go Wild project. And there's two communities within the iNaturalist system that is set up to collect any and all Manitoba records or some of the Manitoba Herps Atlas records. I mean, over the years, the 10 years that I ran the Herps Atlas, I forget what we had. It was 8,000 or 10,000 different records and several different applications from researchers for that data as part of their studies and that.
That's a good illustration of why these programs are so valuable, right? Because, I was talking to Jim Duncan. He was the former head of Fish and Wildlife for the province last year for the story I was alluding to earlier about the Narcisse Snake Dens and some of the science or maybe even the missed opportunities for long-term science that could be done there. And he threw this figure at me. It was something in the range of 90. We would need 90 wildlife biologists just to adequately monitor our at-risk species in Manitoba. So you get a sense there. We don't have anywhere near that many provincial biologists, by the way. And so citizen science, that comes in really handy. It helps fill the void, especially when we hear about some of the effects of climate change and these uncertainties that we have around this. So, using these apps can really be valuable.
Well, guys, this conversation's really been valuable for me. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Doug Collicutt is a retired biologist. Bryce Hoye is a reporter here at CBC with a background in wildlife biology. He can be reached at Bryce Hoye, bryce.hoye@cbc.ca.
You got it.
That's me. I should know that because it's all first name dot last name. Doug, thanks so much.